The classroom shook as the audio file played, a guttural, bone-rattling snarl that sent a dozen alien species cowering under their desks. It was the sound of the galaxy's ultimate apex predator. Then, from the back row, the lone human snorted. "Are you kidding? That's just a house cat." The University of Orion, stationed in the neutral zone of the Perseus Arm, was a marvel of galactic engineering. It brought together the brightest minds of 100 different sapient species, all utilizing universal translators that conveniently mapped unpronounceable alien designations into familiar Western names. It made life easier for David Collins, a 22-year-old exchange student from Earth, even if it meant his 7-foot-tall, chitinous, mantis-like professor was named Dr. Fletcher. David sat in the tiered auditorium of Xenobiology 401, Apex Predators and Prey Dynamics. The room was dimly lit, the climate control set to a universally tolerable, slightly humid 20 degrees Celsius. Beside him sat Sullivan, an avian-descended student with shimmering azure feathers, and a few rows down was Rebecca, a scaled amphibian who constantly needed to mist her gills. Dr. Fletcher stood at the center of the holographic projection pit, his 4 primary mandibles clicking in a rhythm of academic excitement. Today's lecture was on predatory intimidation tactics. "Settle down, class." Dr. Fletcher's voice crackled through the translation matrix, echoing with a synthetic, authoritative British accent. "Today we delve into the mechanics of auditory terror. We are analyzing the neuroacoustics of a creature so profoundly lethal, its mere vocalization is classified as a Class 9 psychological hazard across civilized space." A murmur of unease rippled through the auditorium. Sullivan ruffled his feathers, leaning away from the central projector. "I heard a Class 9 sound can induce myocardial infarction in lesser species," he whispered to David. David simply shrugged, spinning a stylus between his fingers. Humans were relatively new to the galactic community. To the wider galaxy, Earth was a newly discovered death world, a planet where the flora, fauna, and weather actively tried to kill you. Yet humans themselves looked embarrassingly squishy to most alien races. They didn't have exoskeletons, venom glands, or natural camouflage. David was constantly treated like a fragile child who had wandered out of the nursery. "The creature we are discussing today," Dr. Fletcher continued, pacing around the glowing blue hollow emitter, "was discovered on an unclassified feral world in Sector 4. The scout team that recorded this audio suffered severe acoustic trauma and post-traumatic stress. The sound utilizes a unique combination of infrasound and high-frequency oscillation to bypass rational thought and trigger pure primal panic." Fletcher tapped a command on his console, bringing up a complex wave graph. "The bioacoustic terror is derived from its manipulation of sound pressure, directly triggering the fear centers in most sapient species. The stress induction can be quantified by the auditory panic index, S. Panic. Left, alpha. Dot, Pete, beta. Nabla eft, right, I, gamma, tida, where P2 represents the raw acoustic pressure. FTO is the frequency modulation, and the coefficients, alpha $, and Klaus beta lows, represent our neurological vulnerability, Dr. Fletcher explained, pointing his upper left appendage at the board. "In layman's terms, this sound is mathematically designed to break your mind. Please brace yourselves. The dampeners are on, but it will still be deeply unpleasant." The lights dimmed further. The alien students shrank into their seats. Rebecca covered her tympanic membranes. Dr. Fletcher pressed play. From the high-fidelity omni-speakers came a sound that David instantly recognized. It started as a low, vibrating rumble that vibrated in the chest, a deep, rhythmic thrumming. Then the pitch shifted, rising into a demonic, guttural yowl. It was a drawn-out, furious, mrrrr hiss, culminating in a series of sharp, violent spitting sounds. The reaction in the classroom was instantaneous. Sullivan let out a high-pitched chirp of absolute terror and dove under his desk. Rebecca's skin flushed a toxic, panicked yellow. Several students near the front row began to hyperventilate, their biomonitors flashing urgent red warnings. Dr. Fletcher cut the audio, looking incredibly smug as the class slowly, shakily recovered. "Behold," the professor whispered, "the vocalization of a monster that knows no equal, a creature born in the fires of a hostile biosphere, an absolute killer." In the back row, David had his hand over his mouth. His shoulders were shaking. He was biting his lip so hard it almost bled, desperately trying to hold it in. But he couldn't. A loud, undignified snort echoed through the dead silent lecture hall. David burst into laughter. Dr. Fletcher's mandibles flared in outrage, his multifaceted eyes locking onto the human. "Mr. Collins, do you find the psychological distress of your peers amusing? Or perhaps your primitive mammalian brain is unable to process the gravity of a Class 9 hazard?" David wiped a tear from his eye, struggling to catch his breath. "I'm sorry, Dr. Fletcher. I really am. It's just... You called it the galaxy's ultimate apex predator." "Because it is," Dr. Fletcher snapped. "The acoustic signature alone proves—" "Professor," David interrupted, a smirk playing on his lips. "With all due respect, that's just a house cat. Specifically, it sounds like an angry tabby cornered by a vacuum cleaner." The room fell into a stunned, absolute silence. Sullivan peeked his head out from under the desk, his beak clicking in confusion. A house what?" "A cat," David said casually, leaning back in his chair. "A small domesticated feline. We keep them in our homes on Earth. They weigh about 10 pounds. That sound you just played? It's a territorial yowl. It means the cat is really annoyed." Dr. Fletcher drew himself up to his full, towering height. "Preposterous! Human arrogance knows no bounds. The scout ship recorded this on a feral world. The audio signature is fundamentally designed for slaughter. It is not a... what did you call it? A pet." David sighed, realizing he was going to have to prove it. "Professor, can I connect my datapad to the main projector?" Fletcher crossed his upper arms, his chitin grinding in irritation. "By all means, Mr. Collins. Make a fool of yourself. Show us how your fragile species handles a creature whose very voice is a weapon." David walked down the carpeted stairs of the lecture hall, feeling the eyes of every alien student burning into his back. There was fear in their gazes, mixed with morbid curiosity. He reached the podium, plugged his standard-issue Earth datapad into the university's mainframe, and bypassed the security firewall with a quick swipe. "Okay," David muttered, navigating through his personal files. "Let's see here. Family folder. Summer 2024. Here we go." A massive three-dimensional holographic projection flared to life in the center of the room. It depicted a highly mundane scene, a human living room. There was a fabric sofa, a glass coffee table, and a television playing a news broadcast in the background. "This is my aunt's house in Chicago," David explained casually. "Her name is Aunt Margaret, and the apex predator you just listened to is named Barnaby." The camera panned down. Sitting on a plush rug was a creature. It was covered in orange fur, possessing 4 legs, a long tail, and forward-facing predatory eyes. To the alien students, it looked like a miniature, furry demon. In the video, a mechanical, motorized device, a robotic vacuum cleaner, began rolling toward the creature. Barnaby the cat flattened his ears. His fur puffed up, making him look twice his size. And the cat opened its mouth and emitted the exact, bone-chilling, Class 9 hazard sound Dr. Fletcher had just played. The guttural yowl, the demonic rumble, the furious hiss. The alien students gasped. Rebecca fainted, slumping over her desk. Sullivan practically climbed up the wall. Dr. Fletcher took a step back, his mandibles trembling. "By the stars. It is the same acoustic signature, the exact same frequency. You let this beast roam freely in your domiciles." "Watch what happens next," David said, pointing at the hologram. In the projection, an older human woman, Aunt Margaret, walked into the frame. She was wearing a floral apron and holding a small plastic bottle. The monster was still shrieking at the vacuum, its claws out and ready to shred. Margaret didn't flinch. She didn't cower. She simply aimed the plastic bottle at the creature and squeezed the trigger. Pfft, pfft. A fine mist of liquid hit the cat in the face. The horrific roaring stopped instantly. Barnaby blinked, looked deeply offended, let out a pathetic little mew, and scurried away under the sofa. "Barnaby, stop being a drama queen," Aunt Margaret's voice echoed through the video, entirely unbothered, before the clip ended. David disconnected his pad, turning back to face the stunned silence of the lecture hall. "You," Dr. Fletcher stammered, his voice module glitching in sheer shock. "Your matriarch just deployed chemical weapons against a Class 9 biohazard. She neutralized it with 0 combat armor." "It was tap water, Professor," David corrected gently. "She sprayed him with tap water because he was being annoying." "Tap water," Sullivan echoed from the back of the room, his eyes dilated to the size of saucers. "You keep apex predators in your living spaces, and you discipline them with water." "Look, humans love animals," David explained, leaning against the projector console. "We have a habit of pack bonding with predators. My buddy back in Texas, Carter Evans, he keeps literal venomous reptiles in glass boxes in his bedroom. My grandfather, Arthur, had a 120-pound mastiff dog that could bite through a femur, but mostly it just slept on his lap and drooled." The collective realization dawning on the class was palpable. For months, humanity had been viewed as the weak, fleshy newcomers. They had no natural armor, no claws, no venom. But right now, looking at David, the aliens were re-evaluating everything they knew about Earth's evolutionary history. If the humans considered that creature a cute, harmless pet, what in the universe did they consider a threat? Dr. Fletcher leaned heavily against his podium, processing the paradigm shift. "Mr. Collins, if this is a mere companion animal to your species, I dread to ask what actual apex predators exist on Earth." "Oh, you don't want to know about grizzly bears," David chuckled. "Or hippos. Honestly, hippos are the real nightmare fuel." Before Dr. Fletcher could inquire about what a hippo was, the ambient lighting in the lecture hall snapped off. A split second later, the room was bathed in a strobing, urgent red light. The heavy durable, lockdown doors at the top and bottom of the auditorium slammed shut with a deafening clang, sealing the class inside. The universal emergency intercom crackled to life. The voice of Station Security Chief Mitchell, a gruff, no-nonsense humanoid from the core worlds, blared over the speakers, sounding panicked. Code Red. I repeat, Code Red. This is not a drill. We have a Level 1 containment breach in the Xenology Transport Bay. The specimen known as the Goliath krell hound has escaped its stasis pod. Dr. Fletcher froze. The color drained from his chitinous face. The creature has overwhelmed the automated security drones and disabled 4 peacekeepers. It is highly aggressive, heavily armored, and currently moving through Sector 7. All students and faculty are ordered to remain in lockdown. Do not attempt to engage. May the Founders protect us all. The intercom clicked off, leaving only the sound of the blaring alarms. Panic erupted. Sullivan began squawking in hysterics. Rebecca, who had just regained consciousness, started weeping uncontrollably. Dr. Fletcher was rapidly punching codes into his console, trying to reinforce the door locks. "Quiet," Dr. Fletcher commanded, though his voice shook. "The krell hound is a genuine terror. It hunts by scent and auditory vibration. If we remain completely silent, the reinforced doors should hold until heavy security arrives." Thud. Something massive hit the heavy durasteel door at the bottom of the lecture hall. The entire class went dead silent, frozen in absolute terror. Thud. Thud. Screech! The sound of metal tearing echoed through the room. The krell hound wasn't just hitting the door, it was peeling it apart like tin foil. David narrowed his eyes, stepping away from the podium and slowly walking toward the buckling door. He didn't have armor, and he certainly didn't have a weapon, but as the thick metal finally gave way with a violent crash, he got his first look at the galaxy's most feared killer. Through the ruined doorway stepped a creature roughly the size of a large earth wolf. It had sparse, wiry gray fur, heavily muscled shoulders, a pronounced snout, and a mouth full of jagged, uneven teeth. It growled, a low, wet sound, snapping its jaws as it locked eyes with the terrified students. Sullivan screamed. Dr. Fletcher threw his arms up to shield his head. David just stood there, tilting his head as he sized up the beast. He blinked, a slow, bewildered smirk spreading across his face. "Are you serious?" David thought. "It looks like an angry, hairless coyote." The Goliath krell hound was a nightmare of evolutionary biology, bred in the harsh, unforgiving canyons of Proxima 9. It stood nearly 4 feet at the shoulder, heavily muscled and covered in a sparse, bristly gray coat that resembled industrial wire. Patches of calcified subdermal bone plating protruded from its spine and shoulders like crude armor. Its jaw was elongated, dripping with a viscous, ammonia-scented saliva that hissed faintly as it hit the synthetic floorboards of the lecture hall. It was a creature explicitly designed by nature to run down, overpower, and butcher its prey. And right now, it was looking at a room full of soft, unarmed academics. The beast let out a low, rattling growl that vibrated the desks. The sound was purely instinctual, a sonic probe to gauge the reaction of its victims. The reaction was exactly what millions of years of evolution had taught the krell hound to expect. The alien students completely lost their minds. Sullivan let out an ear-piercing shriek, his avian biology betraying him as he went into a spontaneous stress molt, shedding bright blue feathers everywhere. He scrambled backward, trying to climb the smooth, curved wall of the auditorium. Rebecca, the amphibian, let out a choked gasp and collapsed, her body automatically entering a state of rigid catatonic torpor in a desperate, futile attempt to play dead. Dr. Fletcher, the towering mantis-like professor, was frantically mashing his emergency transponder, his mandibles chattering in sheer, unadulterated terror. The movement and the noise triggered the krell hound's prey drive. Its muscles coiled, its multifaceted pale yellow eyes locked dead onto Sullivan, who was currently the loudest and most frantic target in the room. The beast dug its heavy three-toed claws into the durasteel floor, gouging deep scratches into the metal as it prepared to launch itself up the tiered seating. "Hey!" The sound cut through the panic like a thunderclap. It wasn't a roar, and it wasn't a screech. It was a sharp, deep, guttural bark of absolute human authority. The krell hound flinched, its ears snapping back. It turned its massive head toward the center aisle, where David Collins was stepping out from behind his desk. David didn't have a plasma rifle. He didn't have combat armor. What he did have was millions of years of hominid evolution encoded into his DNA. The genetic memory of persistence hunters who had chased woolly mammoths across the ice and driven saber-toothed cats away from their kills with nothing but sharp sticks and sheer, unyielding audacity. He also remembered a summer he spent working on his Uncle Robert's ranch in Wyoming, driving off aggressive coyotes and feral dogs that got too close to the livestock. The cardinal rule of dealing with a canid predator was universal. Never run. Running meant you were food. "Nobody move!" David shouted, his voice projecting with the booming resonance unique to human lungs and vocal cords. "If you run, it's going to kill you. Stay perfectly still." Dr. Fletcher froze, his multifaceted eyes locked on David in sheer horror. "Mr. Collins, are you insane? It will tear you to ribbons! Get down!" David ignored the professor. He kept his eyes locked firmly on the krell hound. Eye contact was aggressive. It was a challenge. The alien beast snarled, turning its full attention to this strange, fleshy biped that had dared to interrupt its hunt. It bared its jagged, uneven teeth, dropping its center of gravity as it prepared to charge the human instead. David didn't cower. Instead, he did the exact opposite of what the krell hound expected. He made himself bigger. In a fluid motion, David unzipped his heavy canvas campus jacket, grabbed the edges, and flared it out wide to his sides. He stood tall, pushing his shoulders back, expanding his chest, and holding his ground. To the krell hound, this soft, unimposing prey suddenly doubled in size. The beast hesitated, taking a half step back. Its predatory calculus momentarily scrambled. But hunger and adrenaline won out. With a terrifying roar, the beast lunged up the stairs, clearing 3 tiers of desks in a single, massive bound, its jaws snapping wildly toward David's chest. David didn't wait for it to land. He pivoted hard on his heel, using the human body's unparalleled center of balance to sidestep the charging monster. The krell hound's heavy shoulder grazed David, sending him crashing into the adjacent desk, but the beast's momentum carried it forward, slamming it violently into the holographic projector podium. Sparks showered the room as the projector shattered. The krell hound scrambled to find its footing on the slick metal steps, shaking its massive head to clear the disorientation. David was already moving. He didn't have a weapon, but humans were the galaxy's premier tool users. His eyes darted to the wall near the podium, locking onto a bright red cylindrical canister mounted behind a pane of breakaway glass. An emergency chemical fire extinguisher. David grabbed a heavy data pad from a fallen desk and smashed it into the glass. The pane shattered. He yanked the heavy cylinder from its mount, pulled the safety pin with his teeth, and spat it onto the floor. The krell hound recovered, whipping around to face David. It let out a blood-curdling howl, spit flying from its jaws, and charged a second time, this time aiming low to take out the human's legs. David stood his ground, raised the heavy nozzle of the extinguisher, and waited until the beast was less than 4 feet away. Squeeze. He gripped the handle with everything he had. A massive, deafening hiss erupted from the canister as a hyper-pressurized jet of Sub-Zero, blinding white halon foam, blasted directly into the krell hound's face. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic for the beast. The foam expanded rapidly, freezing upon contact with the air. It coated the krell hound's eyes, nose, and open mouth in a blinding, freezing, suffocating layer of thick white sludge. The monster shrieked, a high-pitched, pathetic sound completely devoid of its former terror. It aborted its charge, thrashing wildly as it crashed into the front row of desks, pawing frantically at its own face. It couldn't see, it couldn't smell, and its incredibly sensitive nasal cavity was currently burning with the icy sting of chemical retardant. Dr. Fletcher watched in stunned, unblinking silence. David dropped the empty canister. It hit the floor with a heavy, metallic clank. The krell hound managed to scrape the freezing foam from its eyes, backing away into the corner of the room, whimpering and shaking its head. It looked at David, expecting the devastating creature that had just breathed chemical ice upon it to finish the kill. But David just stood there. He rolled his shoulders, took a deep breath, and took one slow, deliberate step toward the cornered beast. "Hey," David said. His voice wasn't shout anymore. It was low, firm, and dangerous. He pointed a single finger at the ground. "Sit." The silence in Xenobiology 401 was absolute, save for the heavy, panicked panting of the Goliath krell hound. The beast was pressed against the reinforced Durasteel wall, its once terrifying posture completely shattered. The calcified bone plates on its spine were flattened against its back. Its ears were pinned tight to its skull. It stared at the human standing before it, eyes wide with a very new, very alien emotion. Submission. David took another step forward. He kept his posture rigidly straight, his eyes burning with the unyielding stare of an apex predator. He pointed at the floor again, harder this time. "I said sit." The krell hound whimpered, a sound remarkably similar to a kicked puppy. Slowly, agonizingly, its hind legs gave way. Its massive, muscular haunches hit the floor. It lowered its head, tucking its elongated snout beneath its front paws, avoiding direct eye contact with the human. Up in the tiered seating, Sullivan slowly lowered his wings, his beak slightly parted in absolute disbelief. Rebecca's gills fluttered as she pulled herself out of her catatonic state, staring down at the pit. Dr. Fletcher gripped the edge of his console, his mandibles clicking in a slow, rhythmic pattern that indicated a profound cognitive reset. By the founders, the professor whispered, his synthetic voice translator barely able to process the volume of his shock. You pacified it. You subjugated a Class 9 bioweapon using nothing but intimidation and localized chemical suppression. It's just a bully, Doc, David said, keeping his eyes on the krell hound. Predators like this, the ones that rely on shock and awe, they don't actually want a fair fight. If you stand your ground and hit them back hard enough, their prey drive short circuits. They realize you aren't food. You're a rival. David relaxed his posture slightly, pulling his jacket back on. Plus, I think the extinguisher knocked its sense of smell offline. Now it's just confused. Before Dr. Fletcher could respond, the heavy lockdown doors at the top of the auditorium were blown open with a concussive blast. 6 heavily armored station security peacekeepers swarmed into the room, leveling high-yield plasma rifles. Leading the charge was Chief Mitchell, a grizzled, scar-faced humanoid from the Orion Corps. He was decked out in full tactical plating, his weapon sweeping the room for targets. "Contact! We have contact!" Sergeant Hayes, the second in command, shouted over the comms, locking his laser sights onto the white foam-covered beast in the corner. "Beast is in the corner, preparing to engage." "Hold your fire!" David yelled, waving his arms and stepping between the tactical squad and the cowering monster. Chief Mitchell blinked behind his tactical visor, lowering his weapon an inch. "Kid, get out of the way. That thing disabled a mechanized suppression squad in Sector 7. It's lethal." "It's yielding," David corrected, pointing over his shoulder. Mitchell and his squad stared. The legendary krell hound, the beast that had required an entire station lockdown, was currently curled in a ball, shivering, looking up at the human with pathetic, pleading eyes. "Yielding?" Sergeant Hayes echoed, his voice dripping with incredulability. "It's an apex killer. It doesn't yield." "It does when it knows it's beaten," David said calmly. "If you shoot it now with plasma, it'll panic and fight to the death. Just bring a heavy stasis collar and a net. It won't fight back, I promise." Chief Mitchell looked from the terrified alien students to the shivering beast, and then finally to the scrawny, unarmed human standing in the middle of the carnage. He gestured to 2 of his men. "Brooks, Miller. Bring the heavy restraint mesh. Keep your weapons hot." The 2 peacekeepers cautiously advanced, unfurling a thick, glowing energy mesh. As they approached, the krell hound let out a low, warning rumble, lifting its head and baring its teeth. It didn't fear the armored guards. It recognized them as prey. It had already beaten. David instantly snapped his fingers. It was a sharp, cracking sound. "Hey, no, leave it!" The krell hound snapped its jaws shut instantly. It dropped its head back to the floor, letting out a soft sigh, and allowed the peacekeepers to drape the heavy energy mesh over its body, without a single struggle. Chief Mitchell slowly removed his tactical helmet, wiping a bead of sweat from his forehead. He walked down the steps, his heavy boots echoing in the silent auditorium, and stopped in front of David. "Son," Mitchell said, his voice a low rumble. "I've been in galactic security for 30 years. I've seen krell hounds tear through blast doors. I've seen them shrug off stun batons like mosquito bites. How in the hell did you subdue it?" David scratched the back of his neck, suddenly feeling very self-conscious as the entire room, security guards and alien students alike, stared at him as if he were a god. I kind of just used the Aunt Margaret technique," David muttered. Dr. Fletcher, who had finally ventured down from his podium, nodded sagely to Chief Mitchell. "It is true, Chief. I witnessed it myself. The human employed a scaled-up version of a maternal pacification tactic used on Earth. He deployed a high-velocity localized water chemical burst, followed by an assertion of biological dominance." Chief Mitchell stared at Dr. Fletcher, then looked back at David. "Maternal pacification tactic? What does that mean?" "It means," David sighed, a small smirk creeping back onto his face, "that I treated it like a bad pet. Honestly, it was easier to deal with than my grandfather's mastiff when the mailman comes around." The utter silence returned to the room. Chief Mitchell looked down at the restrained monster, a creature that had been bred for galactic warfare, currently whining because a human had yelled at it and sprayed it with foam. "Your species," Mitchell finally said, shaking his head slowly, "is absolutely terrifying." "We prefer adaptable," David replied, bending down to pick up his datapad from the shattered floor. "Now, Dr. Fletcher, about that Class 9 acoustic hazard. Do you still think Barnaby the cat is a bioweapon, or can we move on to Chapter 4? Dr. Fletcher adjusted his datapad, his mandibles twitching. "Mr. Collins, I believe, effectively, immediately, humanity is officially reclassified from a fragile newcomer species to a Class 10 apex containment hazard. And as for your feline Barnaby," the professor shuddered, "I never want to hear that demonic screech again." David chuckled, sliding his datapad into his pocket. "Fair enough, Professor. Next time, I'll just show you a video of a golden retriever. They're much friendlier." As the security team hauled the subdued beast out of the lecture hall, the alien students slowly began to emerge from their hiding spots. They looked at David not with the pity reserved for a fragile earthling, but with the profound, undeniable respect meant for the true apex predator of the room. David just smiled, grabbed his bag, and headed for the door. Just another day in Xenobiology 401. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the wild world of Earth's apex biology and the untamed, unyielding spirit of humanity, don't keep it to yourself. Smash that like button to show your support. Share this story with your fellow Sci-Fi and HFY fans, and make sure to subscribe to the channel for more epic tales of humans defying the odds across the galaxy. Stay tuned, because the universe is massive, but human audacity is completely infinite.